This is Canon Fodder, episode 47, live from England or from East Germany, depending on what side you're on. With me, he's becoming a fixture here on the podcast. You might call him the permanent, semi-permanent co-host, Mr. Christopher Sandbatch. Chris, how are you?
Literally the Warren Zevon of the whole scene. That's me. That's like because I haven't had my own show in almost 5 years, and but I still remain relevant somehow by just floating around on other people's
Everybody
shows.
loves Werewolves of London, so you get to
Yeah.
play in whenever you want.
Well, that's what Zevon said about himself, because he would always go when Paul Schaefer was out. Like Letterman loved, because Zevon was this. He was like this cult musician that people in the showbiz liked, but nobody. But he had no paying audience, and so
Right.
he got by on favors. And David Letterman was like, okay, when Schaefer's out, you can be the band director.
That's awesome. Yeah, imagine being everybody's favorite musician except for popular audiences.
I
So
kind
you
of know what
just
that's like.
jump from gig to gig.
I kind of know what that's like. And I started making this joke in 2016, and it's like 8 years later, and I'm still waiting on my feel bucks.
Well, think about it like this, right? If somebody said, "Oh, hey, there's a Warren Zevon show tonight," you'd be like, I got other things planned. But you're
Yeah,
already going to see a band that you like, and then somebody's like, "Oh, and Warren Zevon, he's gonna be on." You're like,
yeah,
"Oh, wow, that's a pretty good get. I feel like I'm getting a lot for my money." So
right,
so that's
exactly.
a Christopher Sandbatch podcast appearance.
And then I guess I'm going to introduce the book because this is a book that's actually there's like 5 or 6 books that when I read them, I felt an impression in my brain, and I said, "Uh-oh, that dent is not coming out." And they're like The Great Gatsby, At Parade's End, Light in August, which I think we've been talking about recently, and then The Spy Who Came In From the Cold is one of them. And it's like I was telling you earlier, when we got on, I have actually had this situation come up in my real life. Like I've had a very real relationship that was very similar to this one. And just because you brought on the East Germany thing, a very good mentor of mine, actually. So you all know, I'm in the Frankfurt School stuff and everything like that. That's because one of my mentors, one of the most extremely conservative people I've ever met in my life, was actually the head of the CIA's East Berlin desk in the Brezhnev era.
Oh, that's
And
amazing. I
yeah,
didn't know this.
yeah. The reason I mentioned the Frankfurt School is the way he was trained for this job is he was at Johns Hopkins when he was younger, and he applied to go to the Frankfurt School's. It was called the German seminar that Horkheimer and Adorno did together, and he applied for it as a semester of all seminars in German. I think it's somewhere in Burbank, maybe UCLA. It was either UCLA or USC. And the whole thing was conducted in German, and it was a great educational experience, but it was also a CIA recruitment program looking for very intelligent persons who could but rapidly learn and become not just fluent in German, but conversationally fluent in German. And he got sheep dipped into the CIA and ended up running the East Berlin desk in the late 70s, early 80s. So, and yeah, he's just one of my actual mentors. But yeah, so this is a spy book. It's arguably the spy book.
I would say it's the spy book. If you are
Yeah.
if you are an Ian Fleming fan, you need to leave right now.
I love Ian Fleming, but
All respect to Mr. Bond, but he's not a real spy.
right.
This book is about real spies and real espionage.
There's a generic distinction that's made here. And actually, I want to take for a moment. I want to go back and we'll grab what is the spy novel. What is the beginning of this? What is the beginning of spy fiction? And you'll get a lot of answers. Some people will say The Secret Agent, Joseph Conrad, or whatever. But I will push it back to an American. One of my favorite short stories ever written. It's only like 5 pages. So if you all, and I think it's one of the most important
let me guess.
Where do you think I'm going with it?
Oh, it's an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge.
No, that's that damn Yankee. Who wrote that?
Ambrose Bierce. He wasn't a Yankee, was he?
Oh yeah. He was one of them Yankees that invaded America. And probably the first book, the first story that really has the thematic connotations of the modern spy novel is a short story written by Edgar Allan Poe called The Man in the Crowd. Okay, and because this is like, as a genre, spy fiction and both of the subvariants of spy fiction do this same thing in a very unusual way. So the crux of this story from Edgar Allan Poe, this is when he was like writing about London. The story is this man he's in a crowd in London. He's like walking through a crowd in Victorian London, and he sees a guy that he thinks looks sketchy or is following him or something like that. And so he starts following the guy and narrating his suspicions about the man in the crowd. And then at the end of the book, it turns out, at the end of I have to spoil this one to make my point. But at the end, what you do is you find out that it's actually the narrator who is sketchy, and he's just been following this dude and like causing this dude that he's following to do evasive things to get away from him. And so the narrator is causing the person he thinks is suspicious to do the suspicious thing. Okay, and really what this is the reason spy novels in particular they speak to us so thoroughly is because we absolutely assume the role of the spy in almost every aspect of our life. Just to jump ahead and quote this book a little bit, there's a scene towards the end whenever Alex Lamas, who is he's an Englishman, he's working for the circus, which is what we would call MI5 today. And he's explaining to this woman that he's fallen in love with what it was all for and everything. And he starts talking about spies. He says, like, what do you think spies are? They're not magicians. They're not knights in shining armor. They're just normal people. They're like people they've had divorces and they have bad jobs and they have, and they have low self-esteem and they're miserable and they just engage in this game of spying all the time to add meaning to their lives, to quote Eliot, like, I had not thought death had undone so many. So like really in terms of genre fiction, I get a lot of shit sometimes because I will, I'll poo-poo H.P. Lovecraft, who I think is awful, right? But there are genres that I love. And one of them is spy fiction, because I think spy stories speak so thoroughly to sort of the modern solipsistic internal narrative. But just to grab the genre, I guess the first formal one was probably The Secret Agent. But in the period after the Cold War, you're imagining, I like to do graph theory, and like if we're imagining spy fiction as a node in a graph, and then like it might have subclasses that branch down out of it. There are two main ones in spy fiction. So whenever we talk about, these subclasses and that sort of thing. So there are these things that we can call spy fiction. There's going to be a certain number, like even the James Bond and the Jean Le Carre stuff. They have certain things in common. And then they will inherit, the subclasses will inherit all of those attributes. And then they'll have their own attributes to distinguish them from one another. And there are really two genres, two subgenres of spy fiction. And they refer to them, you'll be able to tell the symbolism immediately. They refer to them as stale beer spy fiction, which is what this one is. Mm-hmm. And then they'll call them martini fiction, which is what, the martini spy novel, which is what, the Ian Fleming one was. And there's a rash of these stories, especially after the Second World War. Because the Second World War was the first one that really involved lots of formal espionage and so on and so forth. So after the Cold War, you actually have this incredible situation where there are just shitloads of highly literate former spooks running around England. And not all of them are still working for the circus. They're not, and some of them are. Like when Jean Le Carre wrote this book, he was still on British intelligence's payrolls, and he had to sort of secretively write this book because what stale beer spy fiction is it's not escapism. Okay, it's like when Ian Fleming,
it's immersion.
yeah, when Ian Fleming writes the spy novels, he's actually sort of like salving his post-traumatic stress disorder from living this lifestyle by like escaping into fantasy. So like this is what the British Empire would look like from a plantation in Jamaica called Goldeneye, where this former spy who is a Scottish aristocrat lives this like life of like sort of debauched splendor and cynicism that he salves with women and so on and so forth. You don't get that here. You get lots of tedium. And if you've ever watched the movie Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and tried to figure out what's going on in it, this is what you get a lot of in stale beer, in the stale beer variant of spy fiction. There are lots of people doing lots of things for reasons they don't really know, and their reasoning, the tasks that they've been sent to do might be such that them knowing the reason they're going to do it blows the whole thing. And that's the situation we're going to be dealing with here. And so like whenever we talk about it, just imagine yourself in this situation. Okay, so what's happening here? This character, Alec Lamos, is our main character. He's an out of work spy. So formally what this means is he's been blown. Okay, this is they run these spy rings in Germany especially in the early years of the Cold War, because of the paperclip stuff and everything. Germany is kind of this demilitarized zone between the East and the West, where spies run wild, and actually all along the perimeter of like what we would call the Iron Curtain. So from Hungary, Greece is a very popular place for spies. Yugoslavia, Austria is a place where a lot of spying happens, but Germany is absolutely ground zero for it. And it's also worth pointing out that because of the way these allegiances changed because of paperclip and in the aftermath of the war, frequently we will have people who are on their second or third team at this point. There's a lot of former Nazis that are on both teams. There's a lot of former communists that are on both teams. There are lots of, you actually don't have a way, and this is one of the beautiful things Le Carre does, you don't have a way of knowing who is on what side. In this whole series of John Le Carre novels, you only have one way. You only have one character who you are absolutely sure what side he's on, and that's George Smiley. And Alec Lamos is not George Smiley. So there's actually no reason to suspect that Alec Lamos is doing any of the things he's doing for a reason other than the reason he was told to do them. And so, okay. Yeah.
Now, I have a question before I let you keep going, because this is fascinating for me, right? And I kind of hate interrupting, but with the 20th century specifically, and the rise and fall of ideologies, like the big three ideologies, right? Yeah. Fascism, communism, liberalism, liberal democracy, whatever you want to call it, right? Those three.
Yeah.
Right? Do you think that spying, because everybody harps on the technology aspect, like the reason that we have espionage the way that we do is because of this boom of technology. Do you think that we would not have, or do you think we'd have the caliber of spy that we do without ideology? Because George Smiley is an ideologue, Munt, the East German fellow, who he is a total ideologue, and Carla, who is George Smiley's. This is a series of about 8 or 9 novels, folks. I really highly recommend you pick them up. George Smiley is in this chess game with his Soviet counterpart Carla, who we never actually I think we meet him once in like Smiley's People or something. But
once in the very last scene of Smiley's People, you get to meet Carla. Yeah.
But it's very much this these men, even Control himself, who is the head of the circus, which, by the way, one of the best like nom de guerres ever is Control. But
It's so British. It's so British.
It is,
It's
yeah.
another everything
Even
about
just
this
calling
thing
it the
is
circus, even
yeah.
just call it's so good. But this book also reminds me of another ideological American book, Harlot's Ghost, which is later turned into The Good Shepherd. Right?
Oh my
Very,
God! Yeah, the Good
very
Shepherd
similar.
is the Good Shepherd is the analog here. But I
Yes.
want to go back to Smiley for a second and say
Well,
because
answer my
Smiley,
ideology question real
well,
quick.
this will answer it, I think. And the to call George Smiley an ideologue is not something that Jean Le Carre would do. Jean Le Carre would say that no, he's a true believer in the West, in the Western way of life, and he does behave that way. But we have to accept, and this is something I have drafts on this, and like people are coming out of the woodwork. I got told yesterday that I need to write a Western film, a Western screenplay that delineates between the English and the American mind. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's actually what I need to do. But I've been working on this problem for a long time. What is this thing that is the English? And you can tell I'm intensifying if you follow my Twitter feed. And I'm like trying to build myself up to jump over the line and say something finally. But we have this ideology, and we tend to call it liberalism, but it's not liberalism. Liberalism is a function you can call within the English ideology. But the English have their own peculiar way of looking at the world that George Smiley absolutely shares without question. So the ideology question is that 10 years ago, critics would say that no, we're actually learning about the West and how the West is anti-ideological and how the West eventually triumphs, even though all these characters in this book seem a little bit cynical. That really this is a story of the triumph of the series is a triumph of the West, and it's not. Okay, this is like George
Especially
Smiley is
in hindsight. And I think there's the last George Smiley book is A Legacy of Spies. I haven't read that one yet. It came out in
terrible.
it did it. Oh,
Is
that's
terrible.
a shame.
They
He
went
went all
all
in.
the way. He went all the way to the left, all the way to the
Oh,
left.
that
Like
is
it's like
such a shame.
George Smiley's last appearance in fiction is him ranting about how awful it is the British left the European Union. And
Oh man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Oh, that really takes the winds out of my sail.
Yeah, no, but let's set the plot up here real quick.
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
so like
People are confused.
in the barest terms, what we have here is it's a relatively basic spy plot. Alec Lamas is a spy that's been put out to pasture, and like the film and the book, both the film's opening is absolutely incredible, but the like we're talking about the book. Okay, so Lamas he's given this job. And this is like they're really highlighting how badly former spies are treated. And there's a line later where where the Soviet character tells him, he's like you're a blown spy, you're a defector, you're the lowest currency in the Cold War, like you're like no one cares about you. And this is true when he's in Britain as well. And he's been given this kind of half pension. But it's not really a pension because he can't be on the books as a pensioner because he's never actually worked for the British government, you see. And so they hook him up with this job, and he's a librarian, an assistant librarian. But they hook him up with this job to give him cover for 6 months. So the whole thing is orchestrated. Okay, and then he gets this call, he gets brought back in. It's like, okay, you're not actually as in from the cold as you thought you were. You're going back in. We have this operation. We need to take out this character Munt, this East German figure who had been, he had been causing problems for the British intelligence during. Oh, he was a Nazi. This is like his background is he was a Nazi during
died in the wool, and
and he's like still a Nazi. He's definitely still a Nazi.
Later on in the novel, you get a whole you get a whole torture scene with him. Probably honestly one of the best done, but also very boomer truth.
Yeah. I mean, but this is the era when the boomer truth was the truth. This is the truth of the boomer truth. And so what Lamas has to do is he gets sheep dipped into this, like his role is he's supposed to go act like a disgruntled spy. And there's a lot of preparations that go into making this look real. Okay. And he's supposed to do something that causes him to be approached by Soviet agents in London, and then he's supposed to attempt to defect. And then he's supposed to, in the course of his defection, what he's supposed to do is spread rumors about this. I think that, so he's supposed to discredit this character Munt, who's been causing the British intelligence problems in East Germany. He's been blowing networks of British agents in Germany. It's also worth pointing out that this story happens well inside the time frame of the larger issue in British intelligence that is dealt with in Tinker Tailor's Soldier Spy, which is that the second in command of British intelligence, the man directly underneath control, is in fact a Soviet double agent. Okay, so, and the British don't know that. Okay, so they're like their networks of spy, and this is a real thing that happened. Okay, this is the British Gotterdammerung. This is the radical and rapid collapse of Britain as a world power. They go from the British Empire to just this like kind of frozen little island in the space of about 10 years.
To a National Health Service surrounded by water.
Yeah. And one of the big things that does it is their alienation from the Americans, because the Americans start to figure out is like anytime we do anything with British intelligence, it fucks up. And, it's like later, it's like, I think in the 1960s, maybe the late 60s, it might have gone all the way into the 70s, we find out the Cambridge spy ring was there. Okay, and like the British were compromised from 1937 on. It was fine during World War II because they were working with the Soviets, but like the Soviet assets in the British intelligence were never blown. Okay, so the whole thing is Swiss cheesed, and it adds this atmosphere of paranoia to the whole, to the whole book, because everyone kind of knows that something is wrong, and so all information is siloed all over the place. Nobody really knows why they're doing anything. They're just playing these appointed roles, and you go back to your ideology question. No, you need ideology for this to happen, because there has to be what Eliot would have called the objective correlative. There has to be this thing that you can like reach out and touch and remind you of who you are. And that's what ideology provides for these people. Ideology does, in fact, provide the backbone for almost all of it's not technology, actually. It's like, and actually, even today, the most successful spies are remarkably lo-fi. It's just tradecraft. Like you could actually learn to run an Antifa cell by reading this book. No, you can. I remember I was doing research into Rose City Antifa, which is the one out of Portland. And I was looking into, because there was like a guy that went undercover and they got into one of their meetings. And one of the things he had to do to make contact with them was he was told to go to this specific bookstore and to smoke a cigarette, put a fuchsia lighter on the bench outside the store, walk around the block, and if the lighter was missing, he could knock on the door and come in. That's tradecraft, and that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of very unsexy, very like high risk, low stimulation drudgery that encompasses most of spy work. And this book's a little bit more exciting because it's very condensed. It's short.
Yes, if you want more tradecraft for spy, spy novels, right? Tinker Tailor is full of it. Smiley's People, really the longer Le Carre novels. This one is, we were talking before we started recording, and I said that this book was perfect.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that it's like the greatest book ever written, but because it's not. But it's definitely one of my favorites. And I from a technical aspect, from a pacing aspect, I do think that this book is the perfect length with the perfect subject matter, and you couldn't trim anything. There's no fat to trim off of it.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, you can actually the first time I read it in one sitting. You can sit down and read the whole thing in one sitting, and you will. This is like one of these
Oh,
books where you start
it's
reading.
you engross yourself. It's
Yeah, you just get sucked right into it, it's like, I don't know if you ever read Oscar Wilde's the Picture of Dorian Gray. This novel is it's like a cigarette. It leaves you. It's perfect. It's short and it leaves you feeling unsatisfied. But yeah, and I mean, it's got a relatively tight cast too. There's only one, two, three, four,
like
five, six,
five or
seven, eight,
six.
nine.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are 9 characters that speak. Control and George Smiley and Peter Guilhem they're only in there for a minute. So I mean, really, it's just, and I love this type of story. I was telling somebody last night that this is my favorite. I love very tightly focused stories. I love that Cormac McCarthy. Sunset Limited, that's just two guys
Yes.
talking on a train. Like, that's one of my favorite. That's like the closer in you can zoom in on interpersonal dynamics of characters, usually the more satisfied I am with the story is. And that's all this thing is. It's just people talking to each other.
And again, this is considered, quote unquote, a George Smiley novel, right? Because Le Carre did this all the time. I think there are like maybe 2 or 3 in the Smiley series that only mention Smiley briefly, right? And this is one of them, and probably the best one. But
Yeah,
Smiley's involvement in the plot is what damns Lamus, right?
yeah,
And they're supposed to be friends, right? But he completely sells out his friend Lamus for the quote unquote greater good of the mission, for
yeah.
Control's vision of winning the Cold War, right?
We can't do spoilers in this one, can we?
Oh no, we have to.
Okay. Because I'm like,
listen.
in this one, do we tell them how this ends?
Okay, all right, dear listeners, through 47 episodes of this show, I have told you that we will not do spoilers, that we're not going to warn about spoilers. I'm going to break this rule. This is a really good novel. Do not listen to this episode past this point if you haven't read it, because the plot twists that this novel takes are so worth it to read for yourself. And again, pause this, take a couple hours to read the book yourself. It's more novella than novel. It's a quick read. It's a really good read. You're going to enjoy it, and then come back and listen to the rest. Okay, this is your official warning for the first time, for the last time.
So yeah, so what happens here is now we've set up what this is the framework, layer 1 of the mission. In the course of, and this is the thing that makes this thing seem so morally repugnant, and like as though it really makes you, as the modern subject, feel like you're an insect in someone's gigantic experiments. Very Kafka-esque. Because in the course of, okay, now Lamus is this very, very, I mean, he's spycraft does not solve the male loneliness epidemic.
No.
And Lamus is a guy who's got it bad. He's got no friends. He's blown. He's got no friends. He's got nothing.
Actually, and you can't have friends, as like Tinker Tailor later shows us. Friendship in this business is deadly.
Yeah, you can't. Like, you have a wife and kids. Like, oh, they're going to be killed. They're going, and we're going to see that here in a second, because like sort of what happens is that Lamus is working this he's this kind of down and out dude, he's working at the library, and he kind of like has his crush on this girl named Liz, who also works there. And the relationship actually develops, and they start to they have these moments of genuine connection that are, for someone like me who thinks so thoroughly Englishly, there are these incredible moments of just like very tender intimacy between them. And if you know anything about the English mind, you would know that like showing any vulnerability, any emotional vulnerability at all, is the gravest sin of the English people, and that he is a spy. It's doubly sinful for him to do this, but he engages in it anyway. And in the course of doing his work, the Soviets, they arrive, and in fact, really any reader who knows what's going on should probably have their hackles up immediately, because this plan is going too well.
Right. It's
He
going
does his
exactly according to plan.
yeah. And so he meets the Soviets. He does his defection. He's supposed to go. He kind of knows this isn't going to happen, but he's supposed to be taken to a house in the Netherlands, interrogated for 2 weeks, and then paid off, and then he used to go back to England and pretend like none of it ever happens. And then there's a simulator, this real thing that happens. Boom! Next thing you know, he's on a plane. He's in East Germany, and this character Munt that he's sent to discredit is an active live player in what's going on all of a sudden. And he also has this moment, and he's attempting to defect. And there's a scene in the movie that I have to, because it's my favorite scene in any movie ever, that I have to go to. It's called The Western Way of War. It's a clip on YouTube you can go watch, where he meets his Soviet counterpart that he's working with is this character Jan Fiedler. Okay, he's an East German. He's a dyed-in-the-wool communist, and they have this.
Yeah, he's a real true believer. And you forgot to mention that Liz, who is the love interest, is herself a dyed-in-the-wool true believer communist.
She's also a member of the Communist Party. Yeah, I did forget that is an interesting. Yeah, it's an important plot wrinkle, because sort of what happens here is that Fiedler and Lamis, they have there's some very sort of brusquely philosophical things that conversations they have, the nature of geopolitics and the world after the world wars, and you get I would say that since the war, our methods and those of the opposition have become much the same. So they're talking about spycraft, but they're really talking about how in the aftermath of World War II, the factions were the two.
They've become each other.
Remaining.
Yeah.
There's no distinction.
It's like that monologue in Network.
Yeah.
Where it's Ned Beatty. He yells at the old man. I forget his name, but it's you have violated the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale. There are no nations, there are only corporations. The Soviets use their timetables just like we do. It's very much like that.
But then we also have this. Then there's this that happens, and it's sort of interesting, but maybe not the most interesting thing that goes on here, because we have this curtain drop, and then we wake up, and all these characters that have been introduced, Munt, for instance, is physically present, and this woman from England is physically present, because remember, she's a communist, and she's been summoned by the Communist Party.
Yes, that's right. I think it's even like a prisoner exchange. She's there on behalf of GBCP, so the Great Britain Communist Party, or Communist Party of Great Britain, something like that, right? And she thinks that she's there to help free some of her comrades who have been wrongly imprisoned or whatever. And she actually is brought on as a witness to a show trial.
And it's a genuinely fascinating show trial, because again, it's a genuine show trial in the sense that no one knows what is happening or who is on trial.
Yes, that's right. So it's a genuine trial, right? Because both Fiedler and Munt are at odds with one another, right? Yeah. Fiedler is convinced that Lamis' story is being used to, or that Munt is the spy and that he believes in the British sort of subterfuge that Munt needs to be discredited, right? He's so ideologically tinged that he has to believe that everything that's going on is as it is, right?
Right. Yeah. And this is this is the first time you really hear of that. So like it's like this boom trial here, and all of a sudden this this Soviet agent that Lamas has become somewhat friendly with becomes very vicious with him, and because this whole time the secret agenda he smelled a rat, and what he's decided is that this character Munt is actually probably a
A double
British
agent,
spy,
yeah.
a British spy, and this character coming to tell him that this character Munt is a British spy who believes that he's not a British spy.
Yeah, there's so much double think in
Yeah,
here, right? So you have Lamus, who is a double agent, trying to convince Fiedler that Munt is a double agent, right? Meanwhile, Munt believes that Fiedler is the double agent and is working with Lamus,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the reason that the show trial is so interesting is because you have two defendants who are battling against each other at the same time, right? And it's only until Liz Gold, right, and that's important too, right? Because Munt is a former Nazi who is uh,
She's Jewish,
viciously anti-Semitic,
and she's
right?
Jewish. Liz
Yes,
Gold is her
Liz Gold
name.
is Jewish. Yen Fiedler is Jewish, right? And Munt has a sadistic streak to him, uh, because of his associations during the Second World War, right? So he brings her in. She explains that a man named George Smiley said that he was a friend of Lamus, right? That George Smiley pays for Lamus's apartment. He tells her that if she ever needs anything to come reach out to him, and that that Lamus was acting very strange before all this happened, and that she loves him, and all this, right? Uh, Lamus is automatically he just has the wind knocked out of him at this revelation. The fact that Munt knew about her, the fact that Munt was able to bring her over here, and he thinks that the entire operation has now failed, that he is going to be shot, that Liz is going to be shot, and that Fiedler is going to be shot, right?
Yeah. Then we get a curtain drop again, and the curtain comes back up, and Munt is freeing Lamus.
Munt was actually the spy all along.
Yeah.
Fiedler
So
was too ideologically compromised and too competent at his job. He was going to find out about Munt sooner or later.
yeah, so like what we find out ultimately is that everything here has been orchestrated by Smiley. Like not actually just the defection. Every The library he was employed with was chosen specifically so he would run into this woman and fall in love with her. Every aspect of this has been choreographed by this man who was his friend George Smiley, who is running on the side. By the way, George Smiley has does not know that George Smiley is running Mund. So this is a personal spy ring that George Smiley is operating out of East Germany that he considers so important to his own mission in the circus that he won't even tell his friends about this spy ring. So like that's like it's the disorienting world is that nobody really knows what's going on. Like like the person sitting next to you in the meeting room could be, he's on your side, and he could be on your side sometimes on, on some operations, and you could be actively working against him in other operations, but and then from here this story actually kind of flattens out though.
Yes, this is the sad, unsatisfying ending, right? Munt is true to his word. He's going to let Lamus go. In fact, a really sweet part that happens before we even find out that Munt is the double agent, Lamus offers himself as sacrifice in order for Liz to escape.
Right.
Like Liz, she's a communist just like you guys. Let her go. She helped you get off of the trial. Yeah, I'm dirty. I'm everything you knew I was. but she had nothing to do with this. Let her go. Right. Very, very, very fall on your sword, heroic from
I,
Lamus.
I
Right.
tried to save you. That was the meme that I posted yesterday that made me cry. I was like, you don't know the mind of the Englishman. I tried to save you. But but they get the second chance. They have this like thing because she's a committed communist, and she actually there's this little ideological victory for the West. Liz drops the communism. She does in fact love this man. And then, she asked him, so what actually happened? And he explains it to the best of his ability. And this is when he does we're just meaningless people that do these awful things to add meaning to our lives,
And then she asked about Fiedler, and he's like, oh, yeah, he got shot. He's dead.
Going to be shot. Yeah, he's dead. Munt might be dead. We got 3 hours, and so their escape is planned. And, the only way they have to escape is to go climb the fucking Berlin Wall.
Right.
Which, if you're familiar with any of the mythology around the Cold War, this is a thing that it would be less scary if it was more certain to fail. So, but in the process of but people were frequently able to move back and forth across the Berlin Wall.
It's one of those things that it's maybe like a 60-40 shot. If it were even 50-50, people would stop attempting. But the fact that it's 60-40 in terms of 60% it's going to fail, 40% it's going to succeed.
Yeah,
like it's 70-30, let's say.
It's like, do you play the ace king offsuit? Is really it's that kind of situation, and and it's a slow process. You can't do it quickly because you have to pretend to be a laborer up to a certain point. And then there's this moment where you make the mad dash for the wall, you try to get over. And then once you're over, you have to really hope that the American side, the British side doesn't shoot you for trying to cross the line. And then you also have to hope that the Soviets don't decide you're important enough to just shoot you in American territory anyway. And they would frequently do that for the more important, for what they think is a more important defense.
Right. So also Munt is he's arranged everything, right? There's going to be a lull in security, right? Lights aren't going to hit that part of the wall in this window that they have. They're scot-free, right? But and this is that crucial but. Because Munt is such an avowed former, but still an avowed anti-Semite and Nazi, he has his man shoot Liz as she's climbing the wall. Lamus is basically straddling both sides of the wall. George Smiley's on the other side, grabbing for him, saying, Alec, come on over. Lamus follows Liz down back over the wall to his certain death.
Yeah, the only thing the Englishman can do in this situation. You have to.
It's such a gut punch at the end because, again, we're used to a world of good guys and bad guys, right? What do we do with a character like Munt, who is a villain, right? But a useful villain, a villain that is working with our side. What do we do with a guy like George Smiley, who is a friend, but only so far as the mission is concerned, right? Yeah. Friendship doesn't mean as much as completing the mission. Yeah. And his whole involvement in the plot at all is proof of that. The fact that Control, we don't really know much. We don't know anything about Control other than he doesn't like to lose people willy-nilly, right? He does not see his men as cannon fodder. He does see them as useful.
Control represents in a very real sense. He's the British Marine, in the wider universe here. The only person that is a good guy all the time is George Smiley. because he's totally loyal to Control. But Control doesn't know that George Smiley is totally loyal to him. We only know that George Smiley is the good guy because in later books, we do get to visit the mind of George Smiley and we find out the things he thinks. And so we know, like, we don't actually know that here yet. This is
right.
I think it's not the first one, maybe, but this is the first.
It's the third. So
Yeah,
there's
Smiley appears briefly in the first book, but he's only in it for like 2 lines. Smiley at this point in the development of the meta narrative is actually he's a recurring figure, but the decision has not yet been made to make him the center point of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is where we find out most of the things that we know about George Smiley. We just know he's a guy who's known Control for a long time.
Which,
but, you know,
by the way, Tinker Tailor, like anything that you think about George Smiley, you just lose instant respect for him in that book.
Do you? Oh my God, we're gonna have to do another show now.
I mean, I've got a running list of all the books that I want to talk with you. It's literally just going to be the Hudson and Sandbatch show.
Is it because he's a cuckold? Is that why?
Yeah, it's exactly why.
Yeah.
He's a willing cuckold.
It's the fatal. That's also the fatal sin. That's the worst thing an Englishman can be is a cuckold.
For England, James.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the worst thing an Englishman can be or think like.
Dude, I mean that's you were talking about Ford Maddox Ford before and Parade's End, like that.
You know my handle Sandbatch comes from that novel. It's C for Chris Tietjens and Sandbatch for one of his like minor characters who was a friend. I think
you were telling me that once, but yeah. So the Parade's End and then also The Good Soldier, Ford Maddox Ford is writing about cuckoldry the whole time.
Yeah,
and that literally is like the grave sin, and probably indicative of the decline of the British Empire.
That's the implication, yeah. And God, that's like one of these was really fascinating because, like I said, I had like one of these very strange, like sort of cross ideological relationships, and this woman despised the English, and she would use cuckold on me frequently because she knew how bad it was.
But I mean, think about modern England today. They are every Englishman today is a cuck, and his government. The government is literally preferring another man, let's say, or another people. They are being on a civilizational scale. Yeah,
this is why Britain disgusts me. I'm like call myself English on one hand, and I do these shows about I do Hamlet, and I don't talk about American literature ever. I always talk about England, and I'm like, just like, but I despise this country because I understand because I live in the symbolic world of the English, and I recognize cuckoldry as the worst thing you can be. And I look and I'm like, oh my God, this country has become bent over so backwards. They have manifested their own gravest sin into their lives. They have they've become collective cuckolds. Because they know it's the worst in their mind. It's the worst thing they can be. So to be the most anti-English thing you can be is a cuckold. So they became it, and that's what Britain is today. Sorry, Brits. I've been
and I don't say that with any reverie or excitement. I know you don't as well, because we both have. You more so, but we both have our affinities for the English and
I lived in England.
British people. Love it. Yeah, it's it's a cradle of our civilization for sure. And yeah, this to get back to the book somewhat, because I do want to talk maybe a little bit more about spy novels, especially you made that distinction between the martinis and the stale beers that I want to circle back on.
Just a curiosity, did you catch that Munt and Le Chiffre from Casino Royale are the same person?
I didn't actually. That's interesting.
Yeah,
but like now that you say it, yeah, of course, it's like sadistic former Nazis.
Yeah,
I
these two series are so closely related. They're in conversation with one another.
Interesting. Now I'm gonna have to review Bond now because I always saw people would like talk and read Ian Fleming, right? And it's like, oh man, spying is so cool and blah blah blah, and all the technology and all the women. And I read something like Le Carre, and I'm like, oh no, this is what it's actually like. This is, and I
I
love
love
this
it.
stuff, you know.
I love both of them. Like I genuinely love both of them. And because again, they're just speaking to different sides of sort of modernity. There's a reason the whole I Am 1776 crew loves Ian Fleming. You know, it's speaking to some aspect of masculinity that is believed to be currently lost.
Mm.
You know, and whether or not it is, I'm not entirely certain. The stale beer one, on the other hand, this is what really happens.
It's like, yeah, this is the real stuff. This is exactly. There's a
But like, what is the real difference between being a spy and being a, you know, a member of the modern corporate workforce? You have to follow all the same rules. You know, like to a lesser degree, you can't really. This is why communication is so shallow.
one could say that one of our guys in a modern corporate world
Yeah,
is
yeah.
is
Well,
is
but
a spy for the dissident right.
but the other team too. You know, I've had moments with, like, I've just got out of a relationship with one, and she actually, in her better days, she was fine. And I had professors that would used to tell me, like, I had one professor that she was probably more helpful to me than any other person has been professionally in my life. She was a tenured professor, and I was riding home with her in a car from a lecture on German history of all things, and like she's 30 years older than me, and like without even, like, the lights are low in this car and everything, and like we're not talking or anything, we just gotten Wendy's or something like that for your ride back to Baton Rouge. And this was in 2016, so this was like right after Trump was elected. And she looks at me, she slows down in the car, and she looks at me and she goes, "I have 3 sons." And I was horrified, because I'm like, I know what she's telling me, but then I'm also horrified that she can tell that I'm on this other side. And she's like confessing to me her uncomfortableness with, what academia had been doing for the last 15 years, especially with research. She's like, I have to raise sons in this world. But, she also needs this. She's also like very near the top of the academic ladder.
Right.
And she's sort of shackled, and she has this confessional moment with me. And I'm horrified, because I can't totally discount that it's a trap.
And I'm thinking right now is like, there hasn't been a good college, like a campus novel, really. I guess the last one would probably be
I Am Charlotte Simmons.
I haven't even read that. Is that Wolf?
It's Tom Wolfe, yeah. It's his last one, and it's a good one, but it doesn't really touch that stuff.
Well, because I haven't read Donna Tartt's The Secret History, but I hear that's what everybody goes to as like the last great campus novel, right?
I've never read that one either.
Yeah.
The last really great campus novel I read, there's, well, of course, This Side of Paradise it's the best one ever, and then there's A Separate Piece, which is about.
Well, I mean, I would say that Stoner is the best campus novel ever.
Oh yeah. I haven't read that. I tried to read it, but like, again, I was not in a great place in my life, and that book was too damn dark for me, man. I'm gonna have to I'm gonna try
give it
again.
a shot. I recommend it to everyone. It's probably my favorite book. But
it's a cult classic. I see like Sam Bunce loves it. The playwright up in Chicago. He loves that book too.
If someone were to write a modern campus novel, I mean, Baltic kind of did, but it's more encompassing than just the campus, right? One would have to write it like a spy novel.
Yeah,
right? to really get the vibe, right?
That's actually exactly right. The same conversation I had last night about the Western and everything. I was talking to the same person. This is a film industry person. And like a pretty. I mean, I think her film's great, but she's what really well like versed in like this sort of conversation, you know, everything. She said we were talking about that, and I was explaining that my favorite type of poetry is poetry that almost seems to fit into a meter but doesn't quite. And my favorite genre my favorite fiction is fiction that seems to slide into a genre but then doesn't quite. And that's a great example of something like that. So we're going to do a campus novel, but the twist on it is that it's a spy novel.
Right. Well, okay. So, and then think about like, okay, I'm gonna twist, or I'm gonna shift gears real quick, slightly, because there are two very related genres that could not be more different in terms of in terms of the way that the characters interact. You've got detective fiction and you've got spy novels.
Yeah.
Right? Detective fiction, no interiority or very little interiority, right?
Yeah.
It's about think Sam Spade in Maltese Falcon, right? Think Big Sleep and Marlowe in the what's his name? Who's the author of the Big Sleep?
Dashiell Hammett?
No, not Dashiell.
No,
Hammett.
he's the Maltese Falcon.
No.
Yeah, I can't think of him now. He's like the big guy. He's the
exactly.
guy.
Yeah, and anyway, right. He and it's funny because he was British, and he was writing basically a Grail story with Big Sleep.
Yeah, that's great. But like, yeah, I know what you're saying. So like in like the the classic hard, which is another genre that I love. It's another one of my
detective fiction, right?
Yeah.
There is no interiority, right? These guys are almost blank canvases. Like they have their moral code, and that's about it, right?
Things happen to them. Things happen upon them. In fact, Cormac McCarthy's last book actually takes some of that noir, hard-boiled aspect to New Orleans, and just and this character that we have who is he's kind of caught up in this weird murder that may not have even happened, is this character who his tragic flaw is he refuses to countenance any interiority. And he's nothing. That's sort of the point. Sort of the thing that happens in this book is that nothing happens in this book. It's because he's just this character that things happen to.
And meanwhile, you have the spy novel where he not only is the spy constantly questioning what it means to be a spy, right? Not only questioning what he's even doing, and also being asked if he is so different from the people that he is spying on, right? There's no think of the even the spy versus spy mini comics from Mad Magazine. Do you remember those?
Yeah,
where it's like the black spy versus the white spy, and they're literally the same guy, right?
Yeah.
Even something as cartoonish as that really boils down what a spy novel is, right? But these guys are basically doing the same job.
Yeah. And they go to the same bars. They're all in Hamburg all the time. They're all in these.
Well, I mean the detective and the spy are doing the same job.
Okay, this makes sense. Yeah, they're doing and okay, you can have a detective novel that's a Grail quest because morals are possible here. In a spy novel, there aren't ideology. Ideology has replaced morality. So
yes.
That's great for graph theory too. Like actually, just to show my project, I'm trying very hard.
Raymond Chandler, by the way.
Raymond, yeah, he's the guy. I'm trying very hard to do. You ever seen that old Kurt Vonnegut thing where he does the shapes of stories?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love that video. It's a lecture that he did, but.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that at a much more
on a macro scale with your LLM stuff.
Yeah, and it's like frying my brain. But I've got all these people that have come out of the woodwork and who are like, for the first time in years, I have people who are conversant at that level, and it's been wonderful. But it's also been like wow, I've been flattened.
But I mean,
trying to ontologize. You're trying to ontologize story.
At what point are you just recreating Campbell?
That's what I'm trying to move a little bit past. But okay, Campbell. We can work with Campbell at a low level. Actually, really, right. I would be happy to get to Campbell so I can get past Campbell. I do have this because Campbell and Jung go together in my mind, and I do have this, this idea that whenever we bring these things together conceptually into these things that we call archetypes, and we treat them as a unit. What was it? If you follow my blog, I'm all about high dimensional representation. I don't like lowering the dimensionality of representations ever for any reason, unless I have to. And these archetypes and the Jungian thing and the Joseph Campbell thing, I think those are great for up to 1960s or so like that. But if we move past this, the way I would conceive this differently than Campbell is that I would argue that these archetypes are, because you conjured them into existence, they're certainly real, but that these archetypes are themselves just de-dimensionalizations of further subtypes. And I don't think the complexity is reducible. I think you could iterate ad infinitum.
So, and I think you're right there. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're actually seeing the next step in literature is the blending of genre. Right.
Do you think it's a blending of genre or medium as well? Because the reason I haven't written a book yet is because I'm not satisfied with the way I the stories are plastered in places all over, it's on Post-it notes all over my house. But I have not yet found a way to surrender to the actual format of a book that you turn pages right to left. It's because it includes things like tweets and Twitter. I don't know if you've ever seen a book that tries really.
Yeah, I mean, there's. Hold on, let me grab it. It's on my shelf.
Is it going to be a visit from the Goon Squad?
No, it's called. My brother bought me this book. It's called Only Revolutions.
I've never read
it's a National Book Award finalist from maybe a couple of years ago.
So it sucks.
Yeah, but I mean, my brother doesn't know. He just knows that I read. So he just
my brother's exactly the same. He's like, "I'll go through this book, man."
But it's like you can read it forward and backward, and it I haven't picked it up really, except that I kind of don't want to.
Oh yeah, all this stuff seems gimmicky to me. I'm like, to quote Nick Land, we have not yet smashed the Oedipal structures of the novel.
But so I say it's a mix of genre, right? Because at least the most successful film adaptation of his work, of McCarthy's work, is No Country for Old Men. And that is a blend of the noir and the Western. It is a noir Western.
Yeah, that's what it is.
You can The Passenger is very similar in that way. And it's interesting that his later works really do delve into these
all the pomos do this. All the pomos do this. This is this is actually usually one of the things I can do to sort of tell whether or not I'm in a high period postmodernist novel, because they're also doing this thing where they've kind of come to the same conclusion about what ideology is that George Smiley has. And they will include genre as a way, as a familiar resting point that a reader can use to orient themselves. Of course, so they can also play with that convention, like he does in The Passenger, where he sets up this genre expectation and then doesn't satisfy it. He does a Roger Ackroyd on you. But that's a thing that the postmodern novelists will do, is they provide this template of familiarity to then subvert. And so the genres, Westerns, hard-boiled. What is the LA Confidential? Not LA Confidential. Here's the Penchon. Penchon does this a lot as well.
No, that was Crying of Lot 49.
Yeah,
and he
Vineland. Yeah, he did it. He goes back.
Oh no, sorry. Inherent Vice is the one that you're thinking of.
Inherent Vice. He goes. Yeah, he does the classic sort of LA crime novel but things are weirder,
Right, right.
is sort of what happens. Yeah. That's a high powered hour.
Which is fine. I mean, listen. Whenever I have an idea for a book that I want to cover, my first thought is, I wonder if Sandbatch has read this.
I know
And
I've watched you do it. What was it? You were going after Song of Roland in the group chat the other day, and you're like, you're about to get to the point. It's like, is anyone other than Sandbatch read this
who
book?
well, because and a little inside baseball, I really try and get a varied amount of opinions
Right.
from people, and maybe either people who are larger accounts than me who maybe not don't get to talk about books, or people who are smaller accounts who have never been on a podcast before. I'm right in the middle. I'm right where that can kind of be a thing, right?
Yeah.
But selfishly, I'm like, man, I just want to do a podcast with Sandbatch because he has all of these interesting takes, and he's actually read every single book that I've read.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, I think when I first mentioned it, I was like, oh wow, remarkably similar profiles. There's like I feel like I've never met Baltic, but I feel like Baltic, like it's like the book, I actually heard that Confederacy of Dunces was based on Nutcracker, but it might be the other way around.
It's just from
Yeah.
like a temporal standpoint, it's
Yeah.
probably the other way around. But spiritually, it's the way you said it.
Yeah. I don't actually like that book very much.
No, I know you were telling me, and I think I cracked why in my episode with Baltic. It's because it's a little too true about the city of New Orleans.
Yeah. Same relationship that I was talking about. I gave her the moviegoer, and she used it to pathologize me. She's like, "You're just like this fucking city," and I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I am. That's where I'm from."
Yeah, no, I've got a list, and I know this is really interesting to the listener, but I've got a list
what is on the list? I'm interested.
Of books that I want to cover with you. You
Yeah.
specifically, it's The Moviegoer.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one. That's the I Walker Percy's grandchildren are friends of mine. His daughter was my librarian, and his youngest brother was my Shakespeare professor.
Yes,
So,
you did
like,
tell me
yeah.
it's The Moviegoer. It's Paradise Lost, which is going to take a lot of time
God,
for us
that's like
to
my
really do
mind.
our good
My
prep.
my mind just melted at the thought of trying to talk about Paradise Lost. Like, oh,
I would probably do it on a couple of episodes, and then Moby Dick. Because
another one.
why not just talk about Paradise Lost twice?
Let's do the New Testament after that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually it for right now. Probably some more Faulkner, but
yeah, I'm thinking about doing some, because Faulkner just went into the public domain, and I can't stand any of the editions that currently exist for Faulkner. I am thinking about. It pisses me off that there's no way to track Yoknapatawpha County inside the. It's like every editor of William Faulkner since he's died has like been in on the fix to make this the most complicated shit you've ever read. And I'm like, we can actually do some very light footnoting here and make this into a much more readable story. And I'm thinking about doing some of that for Faulkner, because I know the shitlibs aren't going to. He's like persona non grata with them now. So like that's
they heard his opinion on television.
It might have just been he and T.S. Eliot were they were number 1 and 2 on the hit list for most of the 1990s, and it was like, really, because I'm a little bit older than you, it was when I was in college that like they were successfully executed. So like almost nobody reads any Faulkner now, and like it's like we were talking about Fitzgerald. Nobody reads Fitzgerald anymore. If you read F. Scott Fitzgerald, you probably have an Anon Twitter account. Nobody does anymore.
Well, and it's that famous tweet. It's like, every woman wants a guy who reads, but only people who seriously engage with literature have some sort of extremist political opinions.
Well, dude, have you been following that Arxhan Substack, the one that like broached the subject of new age fiction? and that sort of thing?
I follow Han. I haven't been reading much Substack lately, so go ahead and give me the
Yeah, I
last.
have I have been because I've been trying to stay off Twitter, and I'm trying to develop the site because I just crossed 1,100 subscribers, across 1,000
Oh, lucky
1,100
you.
subscribers. Yeah, real. Thanks for all of that, by the way. But yeah, and so I've been in Substack trying to sort of like check out what's been going on here, and Arton, he clued me into a whole discourse that's happening in the cat lady sphere about why there aren't any sad boy novels anymore. And I'm like, well, like, okay, do you want a sad boy novel? I'll
No,
give you a. I was like, I'll give you a sad boy novel, but there was one woman. She was very snarky about it, and she pointed out, she was like, the problem with all of these editors is they want a sad boy novel, but whenever they get a sad boy novel that actually accurately portrays contemporary male interiority, they don't like it,
no,
and so
they want
won't.
they want a sad girl novel without tits.
Yeah. It's like you want to sit. Do you want to
Give
know
me
what?
Gilmore Boys.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to know what men think about? Do you really? It's like this. Oh, and I was like, that's beautiful. She's like, publishers actually do want to publish young men, but they don't like anything young men say.
No,
That's
of course
and I'm
not.
like, and that's of course, that's helped us out. We're rapidly approaching the end of the active political Trump era. He's going to be lame duck, November 6th, no matter what. When that's over, what actually is left from the E-right, and it's the guys like you and Dan and PCM that are actually moving the dial and doing actual culture production. That is that's the great success. I never thought I would see us be the literary cool guys. I didn't know that was going to happen. It's a
Yeah,
side
that's
thing.
and the only thing is, it's like, and I don't know how much of this I'm going to keep in the podcast, and how much of
Yeah,
this, because
yeah,
I don't know how much of this is interesting to just you and me, and how
yeah, yeah.
much is interesting to the listeners out there. But we got an hour's worth of convo in there, so
Yeah.
all good. But I think about stuff like Passage, right, that are trying to build large institutions, right, and trying to compete directly with these aged leviathans like the big five publishers, right?
Yeah,
And
if they have money to do that, I'm all about it. But I am a much bigger fan of like the startup model. It's like three ride or die motherfuckers in like like just churning shit out. I tend to think that's actually the direction that all of culture is going.
well,
Um,
probably honestly, because we're also seeing just such a dearth of talent in the mainstream. People are, and I don't know. On the one hand, I'm optimistic because it's like I've seen my competition and he's ridiculous, you know.
right.
But at the same time, you
How
get
is he my competition? Is the other question. Like, how does Delicious Tacos not have a book deal?
right.
You know,
But then I think when Paul Fahrenheit was on my show, he said that shows like this are the swan song of literacy.
that's probably true.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I was like, damn, you really just took you really just took my entire project for like my whole reason for being online, or at least the one that I tell myself, and just kind of killed it right there, dude.
well,
Uh,
like I had a similar experience one time again when I was in college. One of my very old Southern Lit professors told me, he said, like I'm going to be dead, but you're going to be the guy that turns the light out on this thing. And I was like, yeah, I know.
I mean,
Oh well.
and that's the other thing is we're we're gonna have to become our own what's the word, not missionaries, not ministries,
Pilgrims,
no,
pilgrims,
not pilgrims, monasteries. Yes,
monasteries.
we're going to have to become our own monasteries. We're going to have to bury copies of the King James Bible next to a copy of the Iliad, And
That book, The Giver. I already feel like that whenever I go places. I'm like, I am a biological repository of things. It's like almost like that meme. They don't know about Hegel or whatever, but it's like it's actually, in my case, it's literally true. I'm a biological record of like culture beyond the sophistication of everyone around me.
it's funny.
It's
It's funny. My wife will say, "You're such a snob," right? And I'll say,
yeah.
"No, I'm a man of the people. I just happen to be the last bulwark of Western civilization." She's like, "You say that unironically, so of course you're a snob." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah."
Yeah, you're right, but so am I.
And I didn't see myself going here.
Yeah.
So, Chris, we've gone over the novel. Is there anything that you want to tell the good people? Where can they find you? How can they support your work?
I've been doing Pete Canones lately. There's actually more to talk about, more to shill than usual. I already talked a little bit about the novel project, it's actually really the Western canon. And this is the first time I've said anything about it outside of one group chat. Um, I was reading Dr. Land's essays on, the open spiral. He did 3 in a row last year that were probably 3 of the best essays he's ever written, except maybe Circuitries and the one on incest. But he dramatically redefined what the Western canon is sort of considered, and I have been like thinking about ways that that could be worked out, and so I'm working on that. We might have. I said I haven't had a podcast in 5 years, but I've got 2 different groups of people that now want me to come be, if not the like anchor point of a show, then to at least be on one in a recurring way. So look, I could be doing a lot more content media soon. I'm also, I am going to finish up. I had another spoke jammed in my wheels in real life, so I had to get off the Substack for a bit. I'm going to get back on the Substack, finish that Saturnine series that I was working on, and then we got to go talk about ecology for a little bit, and then I'm going to talk about Nabokov and some books and some schizophrenia for the portion of the audience that likes that more. So that stuff is coming, and I'm probably going to flip on paid subscribers at some point in the next week or so, because
You definitely should, and your content's worth it. Your content's definitely worth paying for.
Like the reason I have it all set up, and there's pledges. So I'm warning, because I'm sure the people who like me enough to pledge are going to listen to the podcast. I'm warning you, I'm probably going to flip on that payment option pretty soon. I actually really don't like the subscriber model, but until I can work out something better, until I can work out some other value add, we might have to work with, like, what I would prefer to, instead of charge you subscriptions, I would prefer to like have you all, I would prefer to run polls for you all, for me to annotate editions of classical books, and then you could buy it if you want to.
Yeah, I mean that's we'll talk offline, because that's been a project that I've been interested in for a long time, which I know you know.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, I just ran into I just came into the technical prowess to do it, I think, and I'm like, there's all kinds of stuff happening. I'm more excited and more active than I've been probably since I was 30. And I'm super here for it. So like, yeah, I'm happy to do anything with anybody right now. But yeah, so like there's lots of writing and lots of shows coming.
Well, like as I kind of mentioned before, I get selfish and I think, oh, I want to do all these podcasts with Sandbatch. I've got a running list of books that I want to talk to you about. So, I know you're really busy. Anytime that we can.
This is my favorite because, like, again, everybody knows me, like, historian, hipster, like all of the things that you think of. Actually, really what I am is a lit bro. Like, this is like, I think in stories, and like, even everything I do, even when I'm doing quantitative analysis on history, the way I do quantitative analysis on history is I go get a giant pile of data and I sort through it until I can find a story. And so I'm a lit bro at the end of the day, and that's my favorite thing to talk about. So I love doing this one.
I think I'll end it there, sir. If you've listened this far, thank you very much. You know how to support the podcast. You know how to support Double Dealer, go buy a magazine, become a paid subscriber. I have a couple of books that you can check out. Otherwise, I don't know how to end podcasts, so I will say insert ending here.